students, we're going to talk about how to set up your first database on the web server so that you can start working with PHP and MySQL. So the first thing is you want to take a look at the login information I gave you in class on how to access your cPanel. Once you're in cPanel, we're going to pay attention to this databases section right here. The very first thing we need to do is we need to create the container for the database, and we do that by clicking the MySQL databases. Once you come in here, it's going to say create a new database. You'll see your username, and then your database is going to have the prefix of your username and then whatever your name of your database is. So for our social network, I'm just going to, if you have like a name for your social network, you can always call it that. So I'm just going to call it social network. And I'm going to click create database. Again, don't put any spaces or anything in there, and I would just keep it all lowercase. Once that's created, you're going to click go back, and then you're going to need to look at adding some users to be able to access this database. So this page here, the MySQL databases, will give you everything that you need to use to do that. Okay, so it'll tell you what your current databases are, and this is the one that we've just created. Then you're going to need to create a user. So what I like to do is I like to have an admin, and again I just make that all lowercase admin, and then I'm going to create a password, and you want it to be strong enough. So I have very strong on this one. Okay, and you can always use the password generator if you don't know what to do. Just make sure that you write down this username and password and keep it somewhere safe, because if you don't know it, you're not going to be able to get into using that aspect of the database. So I'm going to click create user, and then what happens after you create the user is you need to add that user to the database. Okay, so again, we've got our database, and now we have our list of users. You can always change the password here or delete it. Now what we need to do is we need to connect that user to the database. So because these are the only two things I have in here, I don't have any other users, it's automatically going to default to these. So I'm going to click add. Now this is my admin account. So this is the account that I would log into if I wanted to have full access as the database administrator. So I'm going to go ahead and choose all privileges, and I'm going to make sure that this is not the account that I use on my website. So this is just my account for using any of my tools that I want to access outside of PHPMyAdmin. Okay, so I'm going to click make changes. Then I'm going to create a second user, and this user is going to be the user that my website will use. So I'm going to call it web, and I'm going to create a different password. And again, I'm going to write it down somewhere. Create my user. I'm going to go back. Then I'm going to add the web user to my database. So I'm going to have to select that one, and my database is still there. I'm going to click add. Now this time for my user privileges, I'm going to only give it a few things. The first one I want is select. So this is going to be the user my website is going to be using. So I need them to be able to select from the database. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give them insert ability. And this way my web application will be able to insert new records into the database. I need to give them update. So update would be to modify records in the database. And I'm not going to give them any access to delete, because I don't delete from my database, I just change things. So if I want to delete something and change it so that that account isn't active or that user isn't active, or they want to delete a post or something, I'm just going to inactivate that. I'm going to have a status field in my database table, and instead of deleting, I'm just going to update that status field to inactive. Okay, so those are the only things I'm going to allow my web user to do. That way they don't have any ability to access the structure of my database. Okay, so with those created, let's just double check. Go back down here, and you should see current users. You should see your admin user and your web user, and they should be connected. Okay, right here, current databases. There's the name of the database, and here are the users. You have to be a user in order to access this database and be able to use the database. Okay, so once you're done here, you're going to go to your home page, and now we're going to use PHPMyAdmin. And PHPMyAdmin is basically a graphical interface that allows you to do everything you want to do in MySQL, but instead of having it be via a command line, we're going to be doing all of the commands through the user interface. Okay, so the first thing you'll see here is the name of our database, and if you click on it, it's going to give us this message that no tables are found in the database because we haven't created any yet, right? So you're going to use that data model that you've created, hopefully either on paper or through some other program, and let's just start with our user table. So again, the way I like my tables formatted are all capital letters, and I like it to be a singular noun. So remember, table names are case sensitive and they cannot contain any spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and create my user table, and then it says how many columns do I want. Well, if I had a list of the fields I wanted to create, I'd be able to know what I want to do here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in 7 for now, and I'm going to click this go button. Okay, so it's going to give me a structure that I can start working on my field names. So this first section is going to be the name of your field, and now the format I like to use for my field names is all lowercase, no spaces, and I like to use underscores to separate words instead of a space. So here is the name of all my fields. Here is this next column is the data type. So the user ID is my primary key, so I want it to be an integer, and I want it to come over to the index and choose primary. Click go, and then I'm going to click this AI button, and that stands for auto increment. Okay, my next one is going to be username, and I'm going to change my data type to varchar 30. So if you select varchar, you have to put a length in here. Now this is going to be required, as is my user ID, so I'm going to go ahead and click that these are required. I'm going to do an email address, and that's also going to be a varchar 30, and that is also required. And then I'm going to do a first name, and you're seeing a pattern here, varchar 30, that's going to be required. I'm going to do last name, varchar 30, whoops, not 230, 30, that's going to be required. And then I'm going to do a password, and I'm going to have that be varchar 30, and then I'm going to do a insert date or create date, and I'm going to have that be a timestamp, and I'm going to make that required, so that will automatically happen for me. Okay, this is all I'm going to do for now. If you want to add more columns, first save. Okay, make sure to save. So a lot of times the user interface will give you an option to like add more, but sometimes you'll add more and it will, if you haven't saved that data or clicked go already, it will cause that data to be lost and you'll have to do it all over again. Okay, so take a look at the breadcrumbs up here. So it says our server and our database name and then our table. So if I want to see all the tables in my database, I can select database or select it over here. And you'll see all I have so far is a user table. If I want to see the structure of that user table, I can click on the word structure. And here I have all of my field names. If I want to add more fields, I can say, okay, come down here and add another field, and I can choose between at the end of the table, the beginning of the table, or after a particular field. So let's say I want to have another field after password. I'm going to click go, and it's going to say, okay, what do you want this to be? So say I want this to be birth date, and I'm going to come in here and choose date and not null. Okay, I'm going to save it, and it's going to run the SQL command for me. If it's green and says it successfully did that, then you're good. You can click back on table. Oh, that table is going to give you all the data. There's nothing here yet. You can click on structure, and you'll see here's that birth date. Okay, now if I want to enter some sample data in here, I can go to, with the table selected, I can choose insert. So you'll see that this menu changes depending on whether you're in the database or whether you're in the table. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my information in here. So let's say I want to call myself admin, and then admin@admin.com. I'm going to put my first name, admin, last name, site, password 12345, birth date, I don't know, 10/10 1995. Create date should be a timestamp. Okay, it doesn't like this one because I'm sure it's not in the correct format. So there we go. Now it's in the correct format. So I'm going to just modify this and put in some fake data here. Okay, I'm going to click go. Now it will write the SQL statement for this particular record. And this is very helpful because you can basically copy this line of code and use it in your PHP code. Okay, so there's a couple things that you want to know. Number one, it should automatically update our user ID. So let me take a look here by clicking on the table and see what we have here. So my user ID is 1, my username admin, email address, first name, last name. So everything went in here except my create date. My create date is not correct. So I'm going to come in here and change this, and I think I need to have default. Okay, sorry. You need to add the default current time to this as well. Okay, so that, let's try this one again. Okay, so here's my thing. I've got my list. I've got my current timestamp as the default. So that will automatically insert for me. I'm going to click my user table, and I've got user ID 1. I don't really want to have to delete this because I really want to be the first user ID. So I'm going to go ahead and insert another record. And this time I'm going to call the username John Smith. Okay, email address jsmith@smith.com. First name John, last name Smith, 12345. I know I'm really creative with those dates or with those passwords. So I'm going to say 1992 January 3rd. Okay, and then we're going to check this. It says current timestamp. So I'm going to click go. It's going to run this SQL query, which will insert another row into the database, and then I'm going to click on the user table, and now I can make sure that my create date is showing properly. Okay, so do some test data. Have some test data in your tables before you get things going with the live site. You can also do SQL in here. If you're on a table, you can go to SQL and run some select asterisk things. So let's say I want to select asterisk, which will select all from user, and then where. As you start typing, you'll see your columns here. So where password equals 12345. Now I'm putting my password inside. There we go, you can actually see inside quotes, because remember, this is a varchar field. If it was a integer, I would not put my numbers inside of that. So this is a SQL query, very simple SQL query, and then we'll click go, and it will run that query. And because my admin and password, or my admin John Smith, both have the password 12345, it's going to return those. So again, if I want to come up to SQL and do some other ones, select asterisk from user where let's see, user ID equals 1. And this is a query that you're going to have a lot because you're going to save their user ID into a session variable, and you can search for variables within your PHP program. So select everything from user where user ID equals 1. It gives me the entire row. If I just want to select a certain piece of information, like select username from user where user ID equals 1, then you'll see what will happen is I will just get one little piece of data because that's all I've asked for. Okay, so if you want to create a new table, which you should want to, you're going to go back to your database and you're going to click to create a new table. So you can go right here or down below. So if I wanted to do that user profile table, I can start here. How many columns? Then you can start working again through this information. Okay, so let's go ahead, use user profile, and I want that to be int, not null, primary key, and I want it to auto increment. Okay, then I have a user ID, and this is going to be my foreign key, and I also want that to be not null. And then I'm going to put my hobbies, change my data type to text, and let's see what else. About me, same thing, text. From here, I'm just going to go ahead and save it. Now notice I didn't put in here that my user profile information was required. So let's go ahead and see if this all works. So I'm going to specify the user ID 1 for my admin, and I'm not going to put anything in my hobbies or about me. Let's see if I get that. So it runs the query, and you'll see the values. It passes it. It says null, but it really puts a value in there. So there's the 1 for my user ID, and then let's go ahead and click on the table to see what I have in here. So here is my user profile 1, just happens to be 1 because it's the first one again. User ID is 1. Because I didn't check the not null, it's going to let me run that query, that insert query, without any information in there. But if I had checked that this was required, it would give me an error and say you can't do that. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and I want to edit this. And I'm going to say, I am the professor for PHP and MySQL. Okay, so I've got a little about me in here. So now what it's doing is it's doing an update SQL command. Okay, and again, you can use the same kind of code here to use this in your code. So it says right here, create PHP. So obviously here it's giving you what it would look like in PHP. It's not really that helpful, so I would not use that. But actually that would probably just make things complicated, but I just wanted to show you how that worked. Okay, so let me take a look at my user profile table, and now you'll see 1, I am the professor for PHP and MySQL. Okay, so let's go back and run another SQL statement. Now what I want to do is I want to get the information from both the user table and the user profile table. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do select user dot star. That's going to say everything from the user table, and then user profile dot about me. Okay, and then I have to specify which tables I want to pull those from. So I want them to be from the user table and the user profile table. As soon as you add 2 tables in here, you have to use a where statement. So where you have to connect them, where user.userid equals user profile.userid. Okay, and then I'm going to say and user.userid equals 1. Okay, because that is what I want to do. So the reason you're seeing me use what I call these long format field names is because they're the same field name. User ID is in both the user and the user profile table. So I have to specify the long format, which is the table name dot the field name. So I'm going to go ahead and click go, and now it's going to give me everything. This is the power of relational databases and the power of using SQL. So you'll see all the information. So remember, I told it to select user.*, which means return every single field from the user table and then only return the About Me field from the user profile. So you'll see user ID 1, admin, all this information, and then down here it attaches that About Me to that query. So this is how, if you were loading up the profile page, you could do this type of a query to be able to display all the information. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. Set all your tables up in here and go ahead and get some fake data in there. Then you'll be ready to start working with your PHP and MySQL connection. Thanks. Bye.